The metal bench was freezing, but David did not shift. He stared at the cracked pavement, watching the blurred rhythm of heels and soles strike the concrete. Hundreds of people moved past him in a frantic gray stream, yet no one looked down. He was a ghost in his own city, invisible to the rush of the afternoon. His hands were locked tight, knuckles white against the grain of his palms. Inside his pocket, the envelope felt like a lead weight, the paper creased from hours of gripping. It was a rejection letter, a formal dismissal of every goal he had spent the last year chasing. He watched a businessman check a watch, heard the sharp click of a woman's stride, and felt the distance between himself and the rest of the world widen. The city did not stop for his failure. It did not even slow down. He tried to breathe, but the air felt thin and sharp. Every sound of the street, the distant honking, the chatter of commuters, the rustle of wind through the park, only served to highlight the silence in his own head. He was stuck in the center of a moving world, anchored by a single piece of paper that told him he no longer had a place in it. He looked up, but the faces were just a blur of motion, indifferent and cold. A shadow stretched across his knees. David looked up. Mrs. Evans stood there, her hands steady despite the age in her fingers. She held a steaming paper cup. She did not ask to sit. She simply took the space beside him and pressed the cup into his trembling hand. The heat seeped through his skin, a sharp contrast to the cold metal of the bench. "Drink," she said. Her voice carried no pity. David hesitated, then took a sip. The warmth moved through his chest, grounding him. He looked at her, his throat tight, the rejection letter still burning in his pocket. "I feel like I am failing at everything," he whispered. Mrs. Evans did not offer a platitude. She turned her gaze toward the trees and began to speak. She talked about the winter of 1974, the year she lost her shop. She described a stranger who had handed her a loaf of bread and a bus ticket without saying a word. She spoke for an hour. David listened, his grip on the cup loosening. The city's noise faded, replaced by the rhythm of her voice, pulling him back. Mrs. Evans stood, her joints creaking in the cooling air. She patted his shoulder once, a firm, grounding pressure, and walked toward the park gate. David watched her go until she was just a sliver of movement against the distant streetlights. The park felt different now. The silence was no longer empty. It was heavy with the weight of her story. He stood up, his legs feeling steadier, the tremor in his hands finally gone. He began to walk, his boots crunching on the gravel path. Near the exit, a young man was hunched over a bicycle. The chain hung loose, a greasy, tangled mess against the frame. The boy yanked at it, his face flushed, his movements jagged and frustrated. David stopped 10 feet away. The old instinct to look down and keep walking flared up, a familiar pull toward the safety of invisibility. David felt the tension coil in his own shoulders, a physical reminder of the rejection letter still tucked in his pocket. He could turn left toward the street or step forward. He took a breath, the air smelling of damp earth and coming night. He looked at the boy, then at the chain, the gap between them shrinking. David stepped forward. He knelt on the pavement, the grit pressing into his knees. Without a word, he reached out and took the greasy metal tool from the boy's hand. The metal was cold and slick with oil. He aligned the chain with the teeth of the sprocket, his movements precise and deliberate. The boy watched, his breathing slowing as the chain clicked back into place. David gave the pedal a firm turn, testing the tension. It held. He stood up, wiping the grease from his palms onto his trousers. The boy looked up, his face clearing, and offered a genuine, wide smile. In that moment, the tightness in David's chest snapped. The heavy, suffocating weight he had carried for weeks simply evaporated. The next morning, he walked into the local community center. He did not wait for an invitation. He approached the front desk and asked for a broom. He was no longer a ghost. He was present, active, and useful. He kept the memory of that teacup in his mind, a constant reminder that connection is a choice. Years later, the park remained unchanged. David stood on the same path, watching the light filter through the trees. A young girl hurried past, her grip slipping. A stack of books hit the pavement, pages fanning out across the gravel. She froze, her shoulders hunching in a familiar, defensive posture. David walked over. He knelt on the ground, the same grit pressing into his knees as it had all those years ago. He gathered the scattered pages, squared the edges, and handed them back. She looked up, her expression shifting from panic to relief. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the moment. The cycle was complete, and yet it was only just beginning.